Hello. You know, I'm almost positive it was 2002. I was in front of a federal magistrate, a federal judge, for the third time. Already been in front of him twice. Well, I wasn't in front of him the first time. He just made a decision based on the documentation that had been presented to him by my attorney and Social Security's witnesses, very well paid expert witnesses, and Social Security attorneys. He denied my claim. It was for a period of disability, starting in late 1995. He denied that claim. So we sued, and my attorney and I sued the Social Security Administration because his decision didn't match the facts. And the first time I was actually in the courtroom, everybody gave their testimony. I didn't give any testimony, but he denied my claim again. Well, I did, that I was who I was, and verified that I was the plaintiff in the issue. But other than that, I didn't give any testimony at all. Now, the third time, we had sued in district court, state court. And we go in front of this judge, and everybody puts on their testimony. If I'm not mistaken, there were like 12 or 13 very well-paid expert witnesses being paid by the Social Security Administration, plus 2 Social Security attorneys, and there was me and my attorney. I was not asked to testify about anything except verifying that I was the plaintiff in the case. I did that at the beginning. Then at the very end, after everybody around this big, long, real fancy conference table in this judge's chambers, and the judge sitting at the far end of that big, long, fancy conference table up on his bench, on a judge's bench, me sitting at the opposite end, being the plaintiff. At the very end, that judge says, okay, before I take the matter of Daniel Murphy under advisement versus United States Social Security Administration, under advisement, does anybody else have anything to add? And I stood up. I said, yes, Your Honor, I do. He says, well, you don't need to stand up if you don't want to. I said, I'd rather, if that's okay. He says, no, that's fine. I said, Your Honor, almost all of the testimony you've heard in this courtroom today, or in this court today, from these very well-paid expert witnesses, paid by the taxpayers, I might add, with the exception of the vocational expert seated to your immediate left down there, has been an absolute lie. And seeing as how, according to recorded history, the very fall of man, so to speak, was caused by a lie, I'm going to choose at this point not to follow in those footsteps, nor put on that mark. And I sat down and didn't utter another word. That judge looks at me. He goes, seriously, his mouth hanging open. He goes, Mr. Fareed? I said, yes, Your Honor. Do you mind if I ask you a question? Absolutely not, Your Honor. It's your courtroom. He said, well, actually, it's not. I'm just in charge of it. I knew right then that this man's level of discernment was actually far above most people's on the planet. Because he recognized that he can claim ownership of something that he didn't own. And he wasn't going to allow me to get away with saying that in his courtroom without correcting it in a court of law. In other words, he was a real judge. He based things on facts, not what. To be a judge, any judge, you typically have to be really smart. And you have to have a level of discernment that is above most other people's, especially considering the law profession in this country, lawyers. Unless, of course, you're a judge that is appointed by our current POTUS, in which case the only thing you really need to be appointed by Donald J. Trump is having been involved in his sexual immorality of pedophilia and porn snuff films, things like that. Be able to hold that over Donald Trump's head. Then you can become, hell, even a Supreme Court justice. Huh, Clarence? See, I remember driving you, Clarence Thomas. I remember the same building I took you to. Actually, a few times, where egregious and grievous acts of sexual immorality take place. See, I've been in that building. Twice, actually. Well, 3 times in that building. Twice just inside that building. Once down in that secret place that goes way down in the ground underneath that building. And I witnessed what goes on in there. So I know about you, Clarence Thomas. And I know about you too, Mitch McConnell. And Jim Jordan, you couldn't help but brag about what you were getting ready to do in that building. Heck, you even had an orgasm sitting in the back seat of that. I don't remember if it was a town car or a Cadillac, but that sedan, as I turned the corner to where that building came into view, you got so excited about the act of extreme deviant sexual immorality that you were getting ready to perform that you actually orgasmed yourself. Had me pull on past the door a little bit. So that you could, I can't get out and walk in my condition. That's what you said. Ted Cruz. I don't remember if I picked you up from or took you to that building, but yeah. There were a few others too, but you know, why keep going down that road? Y'all know who you are. And you know what goes on in that building, and you know what you partook of in that building. I did drive a couple of clients away from there, and what they do is these people that run that building, they get people that are up and coming in government in various ways. They get them in there, and then they tempt them with acts of immorality of various types, sexual, whatever, so that they can control them. They've had their claws in Donald John Trump since he was very young, because of his daddy being at the very highest level of that organization. And because of Donald Trump's granddaddy being at the very highest level of that organization. What we're dealing with right now in the United States of America, and the rest of the world for that matter, are the effects of a bunch of government officials who are being manipulated, who got their jobs because of their involvement in, I'm going to say it like this, sexcapades, along with Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein and various others, who are being manipulated by the people of that organization that own that building that sits, probably still they use it, directly behind a Masonic temple, which is the same people that own that Masonic temple. At least it was a Masonic temple back in 95. You got to understand that that organization changes the architecture around on their buildings, their various buildings, and repurposes them on a regular basis. It's kind of what they do. They'll change the whole facade of the outside of the building where it's not even recognizable to people that have seen it before. Part of the chain of the roots of that organization is people who were master stonemasons. Really. That's why we have so much corruption in the United States Supreme Court, primarily by 3 Supreme Court justices that were appointed by Mr. Donald Trump, and in various cabinet positions, and in various judiciary benches around the country, and various positions of power in law enforcement in this country, and prosecutorial positions in this country. Pam Bondi. To name one. Oh, and Miss Levitt. We are dealing with powers of darkness in high places. That's what's going on. Have a nice day.